Listen closely, and you can almost hear it again, the distant shout from the street, the clatter of a passing bus, the familiar call that meant it was time to come home. Back then, childhood in Britain unfolded mostly outdoors, unsupervised, unrecorded, and entirely ordinary. We wandered, explored, and learned the world by moving through it, not by watching it. Today, that freedom feels unbelievable, even reckless, yet it was simply how things were. These moments didn't disappear with a bang. They slipped away quietly. And that leaves us wondering, did we ever realize how rare this everyday magic was? To understand that lost childhood, you have to step back into post-war Britain, a country rebuilding not just its cities, but its confidence. From the 1950s through the 1980s, daily life moved to a slower, steadier rhythm. Families lived close together, often in the same streets for decades, and everyone seemed to know everyone else. Childhood didn't revolve around the home. It spilled outward, shaped by pavements, school gates, corner shops, and the familiar faces that watched quietly from doorways. There were routines, but they were shared ones. Mornings followed similar patterns, evenings echoed with similar sounds, and weekends belonged to neighborhoods rather than schedules. Children absorbed values by observation, learning how to behave by watching older neighbors, shopkeepers, and teachers, not through constant instruction. Today, childhood is carefully planned, timetabled, and often lived indoors, guided by screens and supervision. Back then, none of this was designed or discussed. It simply happened naturally through proximity, trust, and time. And from that ordinary setting, something remarkable quietly grew. Those unnoticed habits would define a generation before anyone thought to measure them. Their influence lingered long after streets, shops, and routines began to change, forever altering how childhood would be understood afterwards. What most people don't realize is that these experiences didn't vanish overnight. They faded one ordinary day at a time, because once they were simply how childhood worked. Take the front street. For British children, it wasn't just a road, it was a world. We left the house after breakfast and returned when instinct, hunger, or fading light told us to. There were no watches consulted, no messages sent ahead. The street itself kept time, filled with games, arguments, laughter, and the quiet understanding that home was always there when needed. Then there were the corner shops, those small kingdoms of choice and responsibility. Being sent out alone with a few coins felt like a rite of passage. You weighed options carefully, knowing once the money was spent, that was it. The shopkeeper knew your name, your family, sometimes even your favorites. That brief walk taught independence, confidence, and trust. Lessons learned without ceremony and rarely spoken aloud. School, too, carried a different texture. Classrooms were calmer, not because children were different, but because distractions were fewer. There was time to stare out of windows, to daydream, to let boredom quietly turn into imagination. Routines mattered. Bells rang, lessons ended, and the day moved forward with reassuring predictability. Today, silence feels unusual. Back then, it was part of learning. At home, entertainment demanded patience. Programs arrived at set times and belonged to everyone in the room. Families gathered, argued gently over choices, and watched together. If you missed something, it was gone, replaced by anticipation for next time. Waiting wasn't frustrating, it was expected. That shared anticipation stitched families into moments now lost to individual screens. And always, there were the neighbors. Eyes everywhere, not intrusive, but attentive. Someone noticed if you fell, wandered too far, or stayed out too late. Corrections came gently, sometimes firmly, and help arrived without asking. Childhood unfolded within a loose web of care, woven by ordinary people simply being present. Even small journeys carried meaning. Walking to school with friends, learning shortcuts, knowing which gardens smelled strongest in summer, all built an internal map of belonging. Weather was felt, not avoided. Rain meant puddles, cold meant faster steps, and seasons announced themselves through routine rather than reminders. These details rooted children firmly in place. What ties all these memories together is not nostalgia for difficulty, but for trust. Trust that children could manage small risks. Trust that communities would quietly step in. Trust that time itself would do some of the teaching. Modern childhood offers comfort, safety, and connection in new ways, yet something subtle has shifted. The ordinary freedoms that once shaped confidence and resilience have slipped into memory, unnoticed at the time. That change reshaped childhood forever, without announcement. It's tempting to look back and imagine everything was perfect, but that isn't the truth. What mattered wasn't ease or comfort, or even freedom on its own. It was what those experiences quietly gave us. We learned patience by waiting, resilience by coping, and confidence by navigating the world without constant guidance. We learned how to talk to strangers, how to solve small problems, how to belong to somewhere beyond our front door. Those lessons arrived naturally, shaped by shared routines and shared spaces. Of course, not every day was happy, and not every memory is golden. But something intangible grew from that simplicity, a sense of being part of something larger than ourselves. Childhood felt shared, held gently by family, neighbors, and place. It wasn't better because it was easier. It was better because it was shared. And that feeling stayed with us, quietly shaping who we became. Childhood today looks very different, and not all of that change is loss. There is more safety, more comfort, and more opportunity than many of us ever knew. Yet something has been exchanged along the way. Unstructured time, shared spaces, and the quiet confidence that grew from being trusted. We can't turn the clock back, and perhaps we shouldn't try. But we can remember, and maybe, in small ways, pass on the spirit of that freedom, that patience, that belonging. Maybe the magic wasn't the time. Maybe it was how we lived inside it.